Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first Fireside chat for Litmus here at Hall 16, booth D4. And wanted to introduce, and I'm going to pronounce your name, sorry, Paravdeep from Microsoft. And I've got Harry Graywall, a colleague of mine here at Litmus. And the whole idea here is we're just going to talk about what we saw today. It's the first day of Hannover, and wanted to just talk a little bit about what we saw, what was interesting, and maybe some of the trends that we're seeing in the show. And really, let's talk about also the what Deep is working on with the AI stuff. So I'll just hand it off to you, Harry, and see what you thought of the show. Anything interesting you saw today?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, a lot of interesting stuff as we compared from last year, right? So there's a lot of Gen AI wrappers on a lot of different products at the cloud side, even a lot of applications being built that are powered by Copilot or Gen AI in general. That's been a very pivotal shift. Been to a lot of shows recently as well. That seems to be the key theme. And Pawandeep here, he's leading the product he's the CTO on the Microsoft side. Probably has a lot of insight from us from what the present looks like and what the future could hold for, let's say, manufacturing in general, and then Gen AI on top of that.
So Blondie, if you could just tell us a little bit about where you see generative AI in the manufacturing space. What are some of the use cases, some of the things that you're seeing?
I think, as I was saying, Gen AI is very pivotal right now. And I think what we're seeing is that, unlike, the past where AI scenarios required a lot of customization, with Gen AI, we have an ability to actually penetrate a lot of those use cases in manufacturing much more easily with foundation AI. So we're seeing various use cases, including giving the ability with natural language to assist manufacturing personnel and factory operations. So, for example, if you want to do root cause analysis around either yield or employees going down on a factory floor, we are able to do that in an effective way through natural language than I think what we could do in the past. We're also able to use generative AI for various kinds of scenarios and engineering design. For example, if you're trying to create a new product and you want assistance in the way you are designing it, generative AI gives us a lot of capabilities to do those kind of things as well. So range of scenarios where we are seeing this all happen. And today at Hannover, we announced a bunch of announcements from Microsoft Cloud for Manufacturing, which I can touch on a little bit later on. But quite a range of things happening here.
Great. And one of the things about when you talk about AI and generative AI is the first part is you got to get at the data, right? So could you talk about what you see out there in the market and what you've seen and how people are getting the data and what does that data look like? Is it from PLCs? Is it from databases? Where is that all coming from?
Yeah, great question. As you point out, AI is only as good as the data that's underneath it. So from Microsoft's standpoint, we have been really standardizing on Fabric. Fabric is our one lake where we want to basically consolidate all the data, including IT data and OT data. And part of the announcements that we did today as part of the Microsoft Cloud for Manufacturing is two solutions. One is the Microsoft Data Solution with Fabric. This creates the unification of the IT and the OT data. We have a bunch of connectors. And Litmus is one of our key partners where we have done the connectivity too. And then the second thing is the Azure Copilot template for factory operations, which uses Gen AI on top of this unified data to be able to answer in natural language, keep questions that a plant manager or a factory persona may have on top of it. But that's an important key thing to keep in mind is again. Make sure you have the data and be able to bring that in a unified place to be able to use this effectively.
Right. I think that's always a challenge, especially in this industry, that you've got so much disparate data, different silos, and how do you get that out and unify it? So there is a challenge there, which we can help with. I also look at the Gen AI as it's almost like that smartphone journey that we had back in 2004, 2005, where what do I need a smartphone for? Next thing you know, you can't live without it. And I think AI is going to be something similar. That I already see people using Copilot, and they're basically that's part of their life now, and that happened very quickly. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, look, I think we are seeing a pivotal transformation in the tech industry right now, just like how the various technology trends have changed over a period of years, we do expect generative AI to keep a bit of moment right now. So, when you look at software design or you look at software applications overall, most of these applications will trend towards where it's, a user won't just have something to start from a blank slate, right? It's not like you're to go in and say, let me figure out this particular thing that I'm interested in from scratch. You will have a draft done for you, and generative AI will bring that draft capability. So in a way, it's a paradigm shift in any kind of an application design, in any kind of a software design. An ability where generative AI becomes an assistive nature to create the first draft for you or be an assistive assistant will become the norm in a rather quick fashion.
Right.
And we are starting to see that happen, obviously. But of course, it takes time for all these things to happen. But it is certainly happening at a faster rate.
Yeah, I think it's really going to be part of our lives this year. It's no longer science fiction, is the way I look at it. So, and we've got some customers that are actually implementing some of the more basic ML at the edge and doing more vision processing with it, and they're seeing some great benefits from that. So I think we're able to leverage on some of the stuff that we're doing with generative AI.
Yeah, I think that's a really good segue into kind of learning about how Gen AI could be valuable at the edge, because as you know, Litmus runs offline first.
Right.
So for customers that want to run air-gapped Gen AI, what would be some of the things that you would say from a roadmap perspective that they got to look at if they want to be ready for that at the edge?
Yeah, great question. So we obviously there is a spectrum of Gen AI capabilities that exist in the Microsoft Cloud today. Starting with, of course, the large language models. We have a set of model repositories around OpenAI, which have various family of GPT models in there, and those are large language models, but they run on the cloud. When you talk about air gap, when you talk about edge, we're also creating a family of small language models. So we have released Phi 2. These are smaller models, in the range of 1 to 3 billion parameters, and we are seeing some great performance of these small language models.
Only 3 billion?
I mean, there's a range. There's a range of these parameters, right? And what we are finding is that the accuracy of these small language models are incredibly good. Not maybe as good as LLMs, but they come with a distinct advantage of efficiency and cost, which enable you to run this on air-gapped environments. So there is, and of course, there's a range of these things, and depending on the use case, we can bring those to bear depending on the use case, the constraints on whether it's air gap, the cost needed, and so on and so forth. And you choose and pick the right model, the right deployment topology for those things.
So today's the first time I heard the small language model kind of concept, and I was looking at it and understand, okay, now it makes sense. It's an air gap. Because I think you can go with a smaller model because you're not going to ask your machine to give you a cat video, right? You can narrow down the focus on what you're asking for. Is that what's helping it contain it smaller?
So small language models work really good if you train it on very good quality data.
Okay.
So where there is very specific set of those kind of tasks, it will work great for those kind of scenarios. But a lot of the small language models, you can go and check it out on open source. We've actually released Phi 2 a while ago, and those are great models you can use and actually train your data on, and they tend to work really good in a class of scenarios. I mean, obviously, it depends what class of scenarios, because these are language models and equation models. So depending on that example that you just said may not work, but for language related capabilities, those could be great.
Yeah, I just think having a co-pilot on a machine to say, hey, what's wrong, what, or something along those lines would be a big help to operators.
Having said that, it's a lot easier to actually get started on LLMs because you don't have to train, you don't actually have to fine tune, and these things do require more expertise on having more GPUs, more data scientists, and so on and so forth. So if the idea is to actually showcase a POC and actually see if it actually works and what's the value of it, my suggestion would still be on LLMs. But once you start going into a scale motion and you think, okay, it really needs to be in an air gap facility, then yes, you can explore the SLM model. I think that's a good playbook.
Great, okay. And is there any specific hardware? Are we running on GPUs for this, or?
Yeah, you would still need GPUs.
Okay, great.
Yeah, one of the things that we were talking to Deep earlier was around the data modeling concept for by plugging in small language models. So that could be an area of exploration at the edge for somebody like Litmus. Is we could build digital twin models by somebody saying, "Can you give me a model for a boiler?" made from manufacturer XYZ. So that could be an application of technology that we explored or actually found out that we could do today. So that would have been that's an amazing application of technology at the edge. But then again, let's say when we think about a vision for a manufacturer as it concerns AI. So currently we have manufacturers doing visualization, data processing, ML models in the cloud. With the insertion of Gen AI on top of that, how do you see that evolving into the future?
So I think first of all, maybe it's worth taking a step back and thinking through, how to think about copilots and copilot extensibility in Microsoft generally, right? The copilot is a great abstraction about being an assistive agent for whatever you're doing. That could be language models, that could be vision, it could be, any other set of AI capabilities that you're doing. And today, as of today, I mean, currently, there are multiple ways you can think about creating a copilot for your scenarios on top of manufacturing. The easiest and the fastest way is to actually use Microsoft Copilot. So we have a set of Microsoft Copilots that works on top of M365, whether that's Teams or Microsoft Word or PowerPoint. And as a partner, you can actually bring your data or your specific capability that you have around AI into a Microsoft Copilot through an extension of plugins or graph developers. That's the fastest way to get started. It's not as, you can't really customize it because, there are constraints around it, but that's the fastest way. Then you can think about creating your own custom Copilot. And in that case, you have no-code options through Copilot Studio to create a custom Copilot. This will be a custom Copilot, not in a Microsoft asset, but your own custom Copilot. But again, you can extend it to a certain point, maybe not all the way down to foundation models. And the last approach is full extensibility using things like Azure AI Studio. In there, you can customize the orchestration engine, the LLMs, what may you, right? And this is where we've launched the manufacturing data solution and the Copilot template to ease the ability to kind of x-ray that journey forward. So in all manufacturing scenarios, we expect to be able to bring Copilot scenarios. Depending on where you are in the journey and what the scenario is, we can either quickly go into a Microsoft Copilot, Copilot and extend that, or we can create a fully custom version of Copilot. It just depends on the scenario, it depends on the extensibility you need, and it depends on where you want to surface it into. Really.
Certainly. Thank you for that. The other thing I'm going to point out, since you mentioned NDS, is also let's talk about the southbound piece, which is Litmus and some of the other vendors that are within that space. What are some of the pivotal things that we can do at the edge that will certainly drive some of these use cases in the cloud? I know you mentioned about data strategy. If you don't have a data strategy, you don't have an AI strategy. So how can ISV partners like Litmus help you kind of drive that?
Yeah, so I think, one of the questions that was asked earlier about the data is a key point, which is that, all of this Gen AI still requires data that's in a unified state. One thing I think really is important is to make sure that, we are able to bring all of this data into Fabric. So the more we can actually have these connectors, Litmus has been working with us exactly on that. But obviously, the amount of data that exists on scenarios beyond factory operations or manufacturing is very large. So the more connectors we can do to kind of bring that into a unified data state in one lake is critical to be able to open up this Gen AI scenario. So that's, I would say, maybe the first thing to think about. And then the second thing to think about would be is, what are the kinds of use cases you really want to service for your users? And the range here is quite wide. It could be that you want to go after business personas like plant managers in a factory, or it could be that you want to go after developers who are doing, a design of a product. These are different personas, and that requires a different surfacing and a different engineering that's behind it. So think of that. It takes time to think about that. It takes time to think whether that makes sense for that particular persona and business. Because once you have that figured out, then you can go through and figure out how to think through the Copilot strategy or the Gen AI capabilities. But I think fundamentally you still need the data in all these scenarios, so just do that anyways, and then I think it's a little bit more pointed conversation.
No, certainly.
I had another question about, because I've got you here, so I'm going to ask. But one of the things I've always heard on AI and models, you really need 6 months worth of data just to start. Is that still the case? Are things happening better?
Yeah, so with Gen AI, that's not true. So in normal AI scenarios, you're right that, obviously if you're going to train the entire model, you need a substantial amount of data. And that may still be true for even SLMs, right? Because you're still training those models or fine-tuning those models. But for LLMs, you can use, RAG, which is a, technique for us to be able to give the LLMs the data that it needs to be able to answer the data, answer these questions in a more accurate way. In these scenarios, we don't need a large amounts of data. Obviously, the more data you have, the better chances of being able to intercept the question that comes through. But you can get started with a much smaller base of data with LLMs.
And I assume over time that the more information you get, it gets better and better and better. Just like people want to keep learning.
Yeah. So certainly, like LLMs, you're not training these models, so it's not like you're giving it new factual information. But in context of the LLMs, having a wide repository of patterns of data will be able to give you the ability to bring that into the context of a question that's getting answered, and the diversity of questions, of course, can be very large.
Right.
And so you are able to capture it.
Right. Okay.
But if you go towards small language models, then that is absolutely true. You need data to train these models.
Right. Okay. Cool. Great. Well, very good. Here, any other comments here? Anything you want to talk?
Well, I think I covered most of it.
I want to see if anybody from the audience has any questions. Mark looks very curious.
All right, I got a simple question.
Mike.
All right, so I've heard today Gen AI, I've heard AI, I've heard machine learning models, large language models. Let's just do a quick one. What's the difference between AI and Gen AI?
You're the Microsoft.
It's in your title. You do it.
So I would say think about this like the following. Create a big concentric circle. This is AI. Create a smaller concentric circle inside of it. This is deep learning. Okay? Or actually create a smaller concentric circle. This is machine learning. Then create another smaller concentric circle. This is deep learning. Then create another smaller concentric circle. This is Gen AI. So Gen AI is a subsection of AI, but even a subsection of deep learning. Okay, so it's that helps. Generative AI, yeah. So generative AI is a class of AI which is focused on right now on a class of AI problems, specifically around large language models and then vision. But of course, you can do a lot of other AI with deep learning, and you can do a broader spectrum in machine learning. So there are scenarios, of course, which are like things around forecasting or optimization scenarios and so on and so forth. Like you would still put them all in the bucket of AI. They're not considered relatively generative AI. But again, so think about that as a big circle, and then smaller and smaller circles get to generate.
So the concepts that you're talking about for Gen AI, do they apply upwards through those circles?
Yeah, that's why it's an universal.
Right. So that's the basic start, and then you get more and more and more.
Yeah, so because I'm saying it's part of the concentric circle. So everything that applies to Gen AI applies to AI, but everything that applies to AI does not apply to Gen AI.
Great. Thanks for that explanation. That was actually helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Great. Okay. Awesome. I guess we can just wrap up the first Fireside Chat here at Hannover 2024. Again, visit us in Hall 16, booth D. Be happy to talk about generative AI or connectivity or feeding data connected to your factory floor. So come on by. Be happy to talk to you about that, and looking forward to seeing you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.